This was a shotgun, a pump-action shotgun, that was wrestled from the arms of one of the attackers by the most incredibly brave local member of the public, who ran between two parked cars, jumped on that attacker and managed to wrestle that shotgun from his clutches before the attacker then retreated back up onto a small bridge alongside their accomplice at that point of view. Now, the police commissioner in New South Wales said one of the reasons why they were confident in declaring this now a terrorist attack was because of information received. Now, we understand that information received relates to one of the suspects known to authorities. Now, it may be that they were on a terror watch list, and that's why the police were confident to declare this a terrorist incident. Of course, the other relevant factor here is the fact that the police themselves now acknowledge that it was members of the Jewish community that were being targeted at this Hanukkah celebration. And interestingly, in the video that I watched, which is just so chilling, seeing the two attackers opening fire on members of the public there. At some points, those gunmen on the bridge are just waving at other members of the public who are shouting at them as if to shoo them away, as if they're not their targets, but the targets that they are looking for are those down at the Hanukkah celebrations. So absolutely chilling, and it will form part of the ongoing investigation without doubt. The police will want to get a hold of as much in the way of a video and other information as they can to piece together this. Now, two other important pieces of information to bring you. Police had indicated that there may be a third suspect. They're not ruling that out, but as yet no news of any third arrest in relation to this terrorist attack. But they did confirm that suspected improvised explosive devices were found in a car parked nearby, and that the IED and the vehicle was linked to one of the attackers. Well, bomb disposal teams have been on site working to make that area safe. We're told that they have taken away that suspected IEDs away from the scene, and that area has now been declared safe, although of course it is an active crime scene, and as such we are seeing very significant forensic and detective resources in at the scene now to begin the slow time piecing together of exactly what happened throughout the course of this shootout with those members of the Jewish community being specifically targeted. It happened at 6:47 in the evening, police receiving multiple reports of gunfire ringing out in that area. They sent significant resources, but as I just explained, even when police arrived, they were involved in this protracted shootout with the two gunmen on that little bridge overlooking the area where the Hanukkah celebrations were taking place. The Premier of Australia, Anthony Albanese, condemned the attack as well. Clearly all of Australia on alert now, but also pleased to the local community to stay calm, not to go out and to protest. Understandably, feelings are running high, they say, but the best thing that they can do at the moment is just allow the police and the investigators to get on with their investigation. This is GB News, live and continuing coverage of the terrorist attack in Bondi Beach, Sydney.
Good afternoon, I'm Dawn Neeson, and just to recap, if you are joining us, at least 12 people have been killed at Bondi Beach in Sydney. with 29 currently in hospital. One of the gunmen is among the dead. Footage from the scene shows a man wresting a pump-action shotgun from one of the gunmen. The attack happened as people celebrated the Jewish festival of Hanukkah, which starts today. In a press conference, the New South Wales Police Premier Chris Mims said that one of the gunmen had been killed and another was in custody.
Two individuals began firing on a crowded group of families on Bondi Beach at Archer Park. This cowardly act of terrifying violence is shocking and painful to see and represents some of our worst fears about terrorism in Sydney. I very sadly need to report that as of now, there are at least 12 individuals that have been killed. One of the offenders has also been killed and one is in custody. This attack was designed to target Sydney's Jewish community on the first day of Hanukkah.
Just to reiterate there, 12 dead, 29 injured, including a child and a police officer. Australian police say they are currently investigating if there is a third offender. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the evil that was unleashed at Bondi Beach today is beyond comprehension.
This afternoon, there has been a devastating terrorist incident at Bondi at the Hanukkah by the Sea celebration. This is a targeted attack on Jewish Australians on the first day of Hanukkah, which should be a day of joy, a celebration of faith. An act of evil anti-Semitism, terrorism that has struck the heart of our nation. An attack on Jewish Australians is an attack on every Australian, and every Australian tonight will be, like me, devastated.
Strong words. More than 50 gunshots were heard as hundreds of people fled the scene in Sydney at around 6:40 p.m. local time.
Ran onto the beach. I guess everyone ran onto the beach. It was pretty terrifying. And yeah, I eventually went back to see what was happening. A few people helped a few old people get up and get out of there, but it was like there were lots of bodies on the floor.
There has been plenty of reaction here in the UK, with the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, saying it is deeply distressing news and described it as an appalling attack. London Mayor Sadiq Khan has announced that extra officers from the Metropolitan Police will be on the streets of London following the attack. He says, "My thoughts and condolences, along with the rest of London, are with everyone affected by the horrific attack at Bondi Beach, Australia today." Meanwhile, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has reacted to the tragic events in Australia, saying the Hanukkah party shooting in Australia is horrendous. The threat is everywhere.
Genuinely horrendous. Last I hear, it's 10 dead and many, many wounded. I did see some video of an heroic Australian, taking the gun out of the hands of one of these terrorists. Desperately sorry for the Jewish community in Sydney, which is quite considerable. But equally, you realise actually the threat to the Jewish people is everywhere. It's not just in Manchester or in parts of North London, it's all over the world. And there is this real poison.
Earlier, we were joined by Sky News Australia journalist Shari Markson, who was speaking to us from Bondi Beach.
Police have this evening confirmed that they did find explosive devices in a car on Canberra Parade here on Bondi. It's just the main road behind us. So we don't know what that explosive device was intended to be used for. There were about 50 or 60 shots. This went on for a number of minutes. I'm a Jewish Australian. I've been reporting on the anti-Semitism crisis every single day for the past 2 years. I've been imploring the federal government, the Prime Minister, to take action. He hasn't taken enough action on the anti-Semitism that we've seen explode in the wake of October 7. Even our anti-Semitism envoy handed down a report with recommendations 3 or 4 months ago. He still hasn't acted on those recommendations, hasn't even said he will accept them. So the Jewish community has been has been vulnerable. We've been like sitting ducks here. It's not a surprise that something like this has happened. We've been warning that a serious event, that lives would be lost if the authorities didn't take anti-Semitism seriously, and they just didn't. They didn't act on it because of local domestic political issues. We had a federal election here in May. Some of the marginal seats that were in question are in areas that have a large Muslim community. So the ministers of this Labor government didn't want to be seen to be talking about anti-Semitism so much. It's left us very vulnerable. We have already been living in fear and anxiety. It's the first day of Hanukkah here in Australia. I was at a similar Hanukkah celebration just up the road from the one that was targeted tonight. Families, I mean, I've been here since this afternoon. I've been interviewing people who are on the scene, people who lost the family members or whose family members were shot, parents whose 3-year-old little girl went missing and they found her under the body of a woman who'd been shot. You know, she took the bullet to save this 3-year-old girl who she didn't even know, to save that 3-year-old girl's life after she became separated from her parents. This is the worst massacre we've had in Australia since Port Arthur. This is absolutely devastating. Our country will never be the same. Our Jewish community will never be the same. No one's going to feel safe. If this can happen at Bondi, the iconic Bondi Beach, it can happen anywhere.
Yeah, you can see live pictures on your screen now of the scene. Very dark, very quiet now. Obviously the tape from the police vehicles there still absolutely devastating. And as you've just heard, Australia has seen the largest spike in anti-Semitic attacks of all the J7 countries. The J7 refers to the 7 countries around the world that have the largest Jewish communities. That obviously does include the UK as well as America, Australia, Canada, France and Germany, to name but some of them there. So it's not like this was unexpected in a way. The J7 meeting task force held their first meeting ever in Australia for the first time at the beginning of December, which just goes to show exactly how bad the threat to the Jewish community in Australia was being taken. And you also heard there that pretty much nothing has been done after that meeting, and the threat has escalated. Breaking in the last hour, we can now name one of the alleged attackers. That's our authorities in Australia have confirmed that Naveed Akram, 24, from Bonnyrigg in Sydney's southwest, was one of the attackers. You can see a picture of him there. His driving licence has also been found at the scene. He was shot by the authorities, is arrested, remains in custody and remains in hospital. But just to reiterate, 12 people are dead. They went for a picnic by the sea. They're dead, including a child and a police officer. And as you've heard earlier on from Michael Putul's show, some incredibly brave Australians there. Possibly more would have been killed if one man had not run in and grabbed the gun from one of the attackers. Incredibly proud people, incredibly brave people as well. And interesting what Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister, says, that his government now, this affects every Australian, not just Jewish Australians, every Australian. Showing some backbone that you do wonder is slightly lacking in some other countries, it has to be said. OK, now let's talk to activist Lily Moo, who's joining me in the studio. Lily has spent many years now fighting against anti-Semitism. Lily, just start your background, why you are so involved in fighting anti-Semitism, not just in this country, but around the world.
Hello to you and all of your audience. And first and foremost, my deepest condolences to the Jewish community around the world, especially to Australia and all the families who have been affected by this terrorist tragedy. It is indeed an act of terrorism. What I call this is a globalized act of intifada, and it is what the Palestinian supporters for the past 3 years in the Western societies, whether it was in Australia on their millions, in Sydney a few months ago, or in London in their millions over the past 2 years, or in America, they have been calling for globalization of intifada, which is an act of terrorism against the Jewish community, and starting with an uprising of Islamic invasion of the West. And numerous attacks have followed this demand for the globalization of intifada, starting from, from the terrorist attacks in Washington against the embassy members of Israeli embassy members.
Of course, that young Israeli couple.
Yes, and then again, on Yom Kippur, we had here in Manchester an attack on the Jewish synagogue. And now we have, again, in another country of the Commonwealth and the J7, like we mentioned, a huge attack on a beautiful group of civilians celebrating a festival of light, a religious festival of lights. Now, Islamic attacks on religious festivals that are not Islamic are constantly taking place in countries that are not in places of conflict. And this is not only not being addressed, it is, even earlier today, I was watching different news outlets from Australia itself, and the commentators were not openly, actively confirming the fact that this was an attack on a Jewish community. While they mentioned that there was a Hanukkah celebration in the most prominent Jewish neighborhood in Sydney, Bondi Beach, but let's just pretend that this is just another act of a gun incident. This was a terrorism, an act of terrorism, globalized intifada, and in the past 40 years, Australian Jewish community have been under attack, targeted and systemic attack, which have been either facilitated or carried out by the Islamic Republic's allies and proxies.
We have had no confirmation that this was an Islamic terrorism attack. I mean, many people are obviously putting two and two together. We have now named the attacker, and that is Naveed Akram, 24, from Bonnie Rig in Sydney's south west. He is still alive and remains in custody. Lily, the one thing I keep coming back to here is the UK finds itself in a very, very similar situation to Australia with, let's think how we should put this, tiptoeing around the sensitivities of some communities, i.e. the Islamic community, whilst seemingly be willing to throw other communities, i.e. the Jewish community, under the proverbial bus. Why do you think that is?
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to reiterate my point regarding the Islamic terrorism here. Let us not forget that most of the Islamic terrorist activities and attacks that have taken place in the past half a century have all been supported and facilitated and even taught through the camps of the communist Marxists, which is a godless group. So the very self-hating white person in the West is also allowing for and facilitating and is growing and is helping the radicalization of the white youth community in Europe too, whether it is in Britain or the ISIS French and European fighters that we witnessed over the past 10 years alone. So this is not just an Islamic attack, it's an Islamic leftist attack. Let us be correct about that.
Someone did remark earlier on today that the biggest terrorist actually in the West is the liberal left rather than the Islamic, because they are almost allowing this to happen under our own noses?
I wouldn't say they are almost allowing. I would say they want to hug terrorism out of a suicide bomber. Delusional.
It's frightening. The other thing I wanted to mention to you, Lily, I mean, just on the 12th of December, which was Friday, Miznon restaurant, there's one in London, in Notting Hill, they're Jewish-owned, and there's one, ironically, in Melbourne. Now, they both saw quite aggressive protests encouraged on them, where that phrase, globalise the intifada, and from the river to the sea, the chants we are so used to hearing on our streets at the moment that we almost now accept it. And yet the meanings of those two phrases...
Yes, I just want to say, in the same way that Palestine has no borders, this river and that sea are unknown to most people who are calling out for it. So we don't know whether they're calling from the River Thames to the English Channel to globalize the intifada, or from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. I mean, figure it out, and please let us know how we can handle you, because this whole globalization of intifada is taking lives of 8-year-old children on the beach in Australia today.
Lily Moo, thank you very much.
Before I may go, I have a question. Yeah, I have a big request. We, two groups in London right now, Stop the Hate and R-Fight UK, are holding a vigil in solidarity and unity with the Jewish community in the UK and in Australia at 5 p.m. today outside the Australian Commission to light Hanukkah lights and hold a vigil for the lost lives. Please show up, show solidarity and unity. If you do care about the UK, if you do care about your Jewish neighbors, show us some support. I am not Jewish myself, but I will wear my Star of David in support and solidarity of all of my Jewish and Israeli friends.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Lily Moo, and well said. And I can just testify that you are indeed wearing your Star of David today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lily Moo. And as always with this programme and every programme on GB News, please do let us know what you are thinking. Certainly, if you want to talk, we're here for you. gbnews.com/your say, and we will read out any comments. And we're certainly here if you're worried or you're concerned. I particularly want to hear from you if you're Jewish and you're more worried, you're waking up more worried this morning than you were yesterday. And it's not been easy for the Jewish community recently, but this morning is, as I said, it's just one of those awful, awful things that you kind of knew was going to come. OK, joining me now is former Deputy Speaker of the Israeli Knesset, Moshe Feiglin. Moshe, thank you very much for joining me. Awful, awful news. I mean, condolences. It's just, I don't even know where to begin with this terror attack. How are you thinking, feeling? What are your thoughts on today?
Well, I'll tell you a private story. 3 months ago, I sent a letter to all the members of my family who live in Australia. I have a big family in Australia. Explaining them that basically we are facing the 1930s again. You know, after Hitler got into power at the beginning of the 30s in the previous century, and it's not going to get better. And I urged them to pick up belongings, sell their homes, whatever they can, and come to Israel, because the right is on the wall. And if they're not going to come on their feet, they're going to come on their knees. And unfortunately, what we've seen now is just the beginning. I don't think that there is a place for the Jewish people anymore on the entire world, but definitely on the Western world and definitely in Australia anymore. So I use your channel again to urge all the Jewish people to come to you have a home, you have a place, you have your land. Come to Israel, because what we're seeing now is just the beginning. I actually just wrote a book, Israel is Just the Beginning, talking exactly about that, and warning all the Jews, you should come to Israel, because what we're facing now is exactly the same history that led to the Holocaust 80 years ago.
Moshe, that's just heartbreaking to hear you say that. We are in 2025 now. The fact that we are comparing today to the horrors of 1930 Germany. Why do you think this is happening? And in particular, why is it happening so much in Australia? They have seen the largest spike in anti-Semitic attacks in any of the J7 countries.
Well, as far away from God your civilization is, your culture is, more anti-Semitic you are. This is how it happens. As more liberal, as more progressive you are looking to join forces with Islam. This is a fact. You seeing it now all over. More progressive, more leftist you are, more in favor you are of Hamas. And what Hamas did at the 7th of October, let me tell you, was worse than the Nazis. The Nazis tried to hide what they did. The Hamas were very proud of what we did. They were religiously proud of what they did. And the expectation from the whole world, from Israel, was to wipe them out immediately, to do with Gaza exactly what the British people did with Dresden and Hamburg when the Nazis started to lose the war, exactly what the Americans did with every Japan city in Japan. And let me tell you more than that. No German soldier across the channel did in London what they did in Israel at the 7th of October. So once Israel did not act with a definite moral sense, meaning we have to wipe out this evil of evil, we open the gate for this evil to spread all over the world. And now this evil is picking up its face all over the world. And I already at the 7th of October, I tried to convince whoever I could here in Israel, if we're not going to act immediately and wipe out Gaza and make it part of the state of Israel, a wide anti-Semitism wave will rise all over the world. Okay. I knew it's coming because of the kind of reaction or lack of real reaction of Israel. And this is exactly what's happening now.
Moshe, obviously Australia and the UK both have more liberal Labour governments. I mean, how much do you think the attitude in both countries is enabling Islamic terrorism?
Well, as I said, these two ideologies, the progressive liberal ideology that took over almost the entire Western world, and Islam, have something in common. They both see the state of Israel, which represent the people of Israel, as their enemy. These are two ideologies that their main goal is to wipe out civilization that's based on the Ten Commandments, the civilization that's based on the basic belief in God and reality, civilization that says that there is an objective identity in the world. This was all given to humanity by the Jewish nation, and therefore the Jewish people, represented by the state of Israel, are the enemy of both ideologies. Okay. The progressive ideology and the Islam ideology. So what's happening today, Israel is actually what's blocking, or the first barricade for the entire for the survival of the entire humanity today.
Okay. Moshe, thank you very much for joining us, and as I said, thoughts and prayers with you, and certainly with any family members and friends you have in Australia. That's the Deputy Speaker of the Israeli Knesset there, Moshe Feiglin. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, very strong opinion there. As I said, you are more than welcome to get in touch and let me know what you think. gbnews.com/your say. And even if you just want to chat, we are here for you. Joining me now is writer and broadcaster Rabbi Jonathan Romain. Jonathan, good to talk to you again. An awful day to be talking about. What are your thoughts about what you've witnessed this morning?
Well, when I first heard the news, I sort of thought, oh, well, bearing in mind the attack on the synagogue in Manchester in September, October, I thought, here we go again. But actually, this turned out to be much, much worse because, of course, there were, as you've been reporting, several deaths. And it's really just a reminder of what could have happened here in our own backyard in Manchester itself. And, of course, the killing is appalling in every possible sense. I mean, it was innocent people. There were civilians at a religious event, a joyous communal event for families. And of course, the gunmen were long distance. They had no idea who they were killing. It was totally indiscriminate murder just for its own sake. Obviously, they were targeting Jewish people. But, they may well have included others who were just watching on or being supportive. And there's nothing good to say about this. And I suppose the really big worry, is not only was this an awful event, but will it be become a copycat event, because there is a giant candelabra, Hanukkah as we call it, in Trafalgar Square, other major centres up and down Britain, and there's always the fear that some other idiots, well, not actually idiots, this was pre-planned, it was premeditated. You have to say these were, I don't normally use these words, but evil, wicked people, killing Jews because, it's not as if they were attacking a military installation. They were just attacking ordinary civilians, and nothing good can come of it, and we just have to hold our heads in horror.
Yeah, I just want to read that we have the poster here that was advertising the event. It's Chanukah by the Sea, Bondi Beach Park, near the children's playground, live entertainment, activities, music, games and fun for all ages. This was a family event. The food available was hot chips, ice cream and more. And come and celebrate, bring your friends and family. Let's fill Bondi with joy and light. For something that sounded so joyous to end in such horror is absolutely unbelievable. But you don't sound surprised.
No, unfortunately not. Saddened, shocked, but not surprised, because, as I said, we have had this in our own country, in Manchester, the attack on the synagogue in Heaton Park, and also in other parts of the world. And I have to say, of course, there are madmen everywhere, because there's also another murder or massacre going on in the States, I believe, earlier today, which has been riven with all these sorts of attacks. I mean, one of the good things about Australia is that you may remember there was a massacre in Tasmania in 1996, and mass shooting, and as a result of that, they introduced some very tough gun laws, which means that actually guns have been in fairly short supply, and therefore these gunmen, the two or maybe the three, obviously, again, premeditated, pre-planned. They obviously got had this in mind, chose the best position to kill people from afar, and got the guns and ammunition. So it's rare, but unfortunately, it was almost a culmination of what's happened over the last 2 years. And in terms of how we react here in this country, well, I think obviously, unfortunately, it's going to need immediate levels of extra police protection at Jewish events or synagogues. And yet, on the other hand, I'm very, very adamant it should be a balanced response. In other words, we don't want to turn synagogues into fortresses. We don't want to surround ourselves with barbed wire. It would be sort of giving in to the gunmen if we sort of isolated ourselves from the rest of society or limited our own activity. So, yes, be vigilant, be careful, have extra protection, but also keep our doors open. And it's a difficult balance, especially when you see the body bags on television, but it's one we've got to keep. Otherwise, we give them victory.
That's, well, very, very, very well said. Sadiq Khan, obviously the Mayor of London, has promised extra officers patrolling Jewish communities, his words, not mine, ahead of the Hanukkah celebration events coming up, as you mentioned, will be taking place in Trafalgar Square. How safe does that make you feel?
Well, I'm reassured, just as I was very pleased that the Australian Prime Minister immediately said, and I'm going to quote exactly, he said, an attack on Jewish Australians is an attack on all Australians, and it's an attack on our way of life, he said. I think that was a very powerful message. And I think, to be fair to Keir Starmer, he said similar sort of things. And if you think about it, attacking Jews is just such a nonsense. It's so illogical. It's, Jews are, and I'm astonished I'm telling you this because you know it already, but Jews are ordinary, normal people.
Of course.
And we've got televisions and mortgages, and we go to football clubs and pubs, and we're no threat to anybody. So why is there this extraordinary vitriolic hatred? It's beyond belief. It's no sense at all. And of course, it doesn't achieve anything other than fear and hatred. Maybe that's what the gunmen wanted to do, and we must make sure that they don't succeed in that.
Yeah. And Jonathan, just finally, the one thing I wanted to ask you, whenever we have anything like this happen in this country, I mean, even going back to you mentioned football, the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans visiting Villa Park for the European game against Aston Villa. I mean, they were kept from going to the game, banned from going to the game for their own protection. Being Jewish shouldn't mean you're frightened to go or do anything. You should be allowed to go to a football match.
Yes, I agree. And by the way, the Maccabi Aston Villa issue is a very murky one, and I think the police are now backtracking. I'm a police chaplain, by the way, so I have a lot of sympathy for the police. But I think on this one, the West Midlands force may well have got it wrong, or some of the individuals may have got it wrong. And what was extraordinary is that the Maccabi fans didn't go. And yet they still had 700 police on duty, so and 11 arrests. So really, it was probably about the local population and elements within it being anti-Jewish. And instead of saying to them, as the police do to any other group, no, you know, people have a right to protest, to demonstrate, to go to football matches, whatever, and we're going to protect them. We may sort of make sure they go in, enter in a certain route and all the rest of it, but we're going to protect them. Instead, the police caved in. So that's a pretty unfortunate example, and hopefully one that won't be repeated again.
Well, I certainly hope that is the case, because it does seem to have chilling echoes of the past, where people of the Jewish faith, whether they support Israel or not, are being told to stay in one place, to shut up, to know your place. I mean, am I overthinking that? I just get the impression that, you know, even thinking about this, a simple thing like a football match, you know, if you're Jewish and you're Maccabi Tel Aviv, you can't go.
No, and that's right. And when it gets to this level, you really scratch your head and wondering what sort of society we're living in, not just for Jews, but for ordinary people. You know, is this group or that group going to be either banned or curtailed? I can tell you that I am going to my football club this Thursday evening, which is, to save you asking, the mighty Reading Football Club, but there we go. And I'm going to go as a proud supporter. I'm very determined that Jewish life, although, as I said, we have to be wary, we're going to continue full steam ahead. And of course, it's important, going back to the Bondi Beach, to remember, yes, there were 2, maybe 3 gunmen, but there are millions of Australians who are appalled. And I think we just need to remember this is a minority act, extraordinary minority act, and we've got to keep that in perspective. Otherwise, we give in to them, and we don't want to have a sort of a mental terror as well as a physical one.
No, as you say, Jonathan, terror works by terrorising people, and that's exactly so. I mean, I really admire your attitude, and let's hope most sensible people agree with your sentiments there. What do you think now the government in the UK needs to do to ensure that the rise in anti-Semitism, which we have seen, is dampened down?
I suppose it would be, as you would deal with any situation, try and cut it off at source. So give a message to the wider community, this is unacceptable. Also target hate groups. The problem is, of course, to be fair to the government, a lot of these are individuals or lone wolves, as seems to be the case in the Manchester synagogue attack. And it's actually a tough job. So, you know, all credit to the police, all credit to the special services who try to sort of prevent these attacks. But it is hard work. And therefore, citizens can play their role, I won't say as amateur detectives, but if you've got suspicion about somebody, I don't know, saying some very, very, not just vicious, but violent things, maybe if you see them, you know, doing some strange things or learning how to make bombs or goodness knows what, rather than thinking tut tut or oh dear, then you have to report it. We don't want to have a vigilante society, but we do want to be vigilant, and there is a very crucial difference between the two.
I mean, Jonathan, we have spoken before about the pro-Palestine marches that have been allowed to take place. Everyone has the right to protest, absolutely, of course. But when and I just use the example I wanted to mention to you as well, a restaurant, Miznon restaurant, you might be familiar with it, in London's Notting Hill. It also has a branch in Melbourne. It's owned by Jews. And there was a protest there on Friday night, the 12th of December, and outside both restaurants, ironically, as I said, one in Melbourne. And that was organised by pro-Palestine protesting groups. And they were verbally attacking Jewish customers simply having an evening meal with chance of globalise the Intifada and, you know, as we all know, fly now from the river to the sea. Nothing was done about these protests, not here in the UK and not in Australia. Do you think the fact that the liberal left-wing governments that we have in both of our countries is almost enabling people to demonstrate, let's face it, with chants like that, rabid Jew hatred on the streets and get away with it?
Unfortunately, the criticism that there's two-tier policing does sometimes seem to be the case. And, would the police have allowed that outside a Muslim restaurant or a Sikh or a Hindu one? I suspect not. I mean, yes, you're quite right, legitimate protest, but that can be in the public square. It doesn't have to be outside a Jewish home, a Jewish business. And also, of course, at root of it is the assumption that all Jews support Israel. Well, we may well do support the people of Israel or the existence of the state, but not necessarily the government of the day or the political policy of the day. I'm a patriot. I support this country. I don't necessarily support Kemi Badenoch or Keir Starmer. You don't make that assumption about me. We shouldn't make that assumption about Jews being necessarily in favour either way. So that, I think, does cross the border between anti-Israel and anti-Semitism. When you target Jews on the assumption they're responsible for what's happening in Gaza, that's anti-Semitism. There's no doubt about it. Nothing. By all means, if you want to demonstrate outside the Israeli embassy, okay, there's a political cause. Whether I agree with it or not doesn't really matter. But outside a Jewish restaurant, what on earth has that got to do with Gaza? And by the way, how on earth does it help a single Palestinian? If you want to help them, donate money to a Palestinian Red Crescent or whatever, but don't target a Jewish restaurant and go home and feel good about it.
Do you think Keir Starmer and Sadiq Khan in London, where, as you say, there's going to be Hanukkah celebrations taking place over the next few days, do you think they should do more immediately? Should they maybe take tougher stance against people who are targeting Jewish homes and synagogues and restaurants? I mean, when I walked into work today, I saw two people at the station with, I don't know where they were going or what they were doing, but they had Palestinian flags. And I mean, I'm not Jewish, but I thought that just feels completely and utterly wrong today.
I think they do need to do something just to give a message that anti-Semitism, attacking Jews because they are Jews, is unacceptable. I don't want to have a police state, but I think they need to sort of just raise the profile. They have to, again, to give the government credit, they have done a lot, both openly and behind the scenes. But I think there has to be a message. Bondi is unacceptable. They did that at Manchester. Unfortunately, they've got to do it again. That's the awful thing about it. That what we thought was a one-off at Manchester is happening again. We don't want it to be talking, you and I, this time next week about yet another attack.
No, please God, whatever God you happen to worship, we don't do that. Just finally, Jonathan, do you think the situation, not just in Australia, but in the UK, and we have seen other attacks in Germany, we've seen them in France, we have seen Islamic attacks on not just Jewish people, but on ordinary young people going to concerts, for example. Do you think the situation, do you hope the situation is going to get better before it gets worse, or do you suspect, as many of us do after this morning, that things might get worse before they get better?
Well, like everybody, I just hang my head and think, what kind of society are we? I mean, there's always been violence, but not this mindless violence, and not this targeted violence. Yes, I hope it gets better, but it does depend not just on the police, but on ordinary people. And when you hear people, in the pub or on social media saying things that are actually possibly going to lead to violence, it's one thing sounding off about this or that, but leading to violence, then I think you have a duty to draw it to the attention of other people, to the police, because violence words lead to violent actions. We know that, and the people of Bondi know that only too well today.
Absolutely, a very hard lesson learned for everybody. Jonathan, always a joy to talk to you. That's writer and broadcaster, Rabbi Jonathan Romain, and enjoy the match and may the best team win. I'm a West Ham fan, so I'm not going down that road. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Good to talk to you. OK, well, I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GBNews, and you are joining us on a very tough day. The Bondi Beach attack has now been confirmed as 12 dead, 29 injured. The dead include a child and a police officer. So joining me now is our Home and Security editor, Mark White, to bring us up to date on developments in Australia. Mark.
Well, we can confirm, obviously, the number of dead as 11 innocent members of the public, and of course one of the attackers, taking the death toll to 12, but 29 in hospital, including 2 police officers. All are described as being in a serious condition. And we can confirm as well now the name of one of the suspected attackers. That individual is 24-year-old Naveed Akram. He is described as of Pakistani origin, from Lahore in Pakistan. This is him on the bridge, that small bridge overlooking the area where people were gathering for this Hanukkah celebration. His driver's license was found beside him as well. That has been used to help identify him. We are not sure at this stage whether he is the individual that authorities say is known to them. You can see from the driver's license there, that's clearly the man on the bridge, 24-year-old Naveed Akram. But we have heard from the head of Australia's spy agency that one of the alleged attackers was known to the security services. Now, they've said not in the sense of posing an immediate threat, or at least that's the early indications they have, but clearly known to the security services on some kind of a terrorist or extremist database. And it will obviously remain to be seen in the sort of hours and days ahead just how significant that information is, and whether actually there was anything more the authorities could have done to get a handle on this threat, whether there was intelligence that may not have been acted on in the way it should have. That often is the case, sadly, with terrorist threats. We've seen in this country before multiple terrorist attacks that have taken place, from 7/7 to London Bridge to Manchester Arena, with information on extremists, known extremists, that the police and intelligence services in some cases had not joined the dots and put the intelligence picture clearly together, showing the threat. We can tell you, though, that sources have told us that the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad has warned Australia, has warned authorities in Australia on multiple occasions recently about a growing threat targeting the Jewish community in Australia, and a threat that, according to sources, Mossad had said was linked to the Iranians, that it was either being backed by or encouraged by the Iranian regime. Those warnings and intelligence apparently passed on to Australian authorities. So, as I say, we're in very early stages after this incident, only a few hours later. So we are, of course, in the phase at the moment of dealing with the specific incident, of now, of course, the detectives and forensic teams getting in there to piece together the minute-by-minute account of what actually happened. But in tandem with that is the investigation now into the 2 attackers in custody. There may be a third, according to the police, but that is just an avenue they're exploring out of an abundance of caution. They're not saying that they have a key suspect in mind, but there were some eyewitness reports suggesting a possibility of a third attacker, so the police are looking into that. But in tandem, as I say, with the ongoing on-the-ground piecing together of what happened, is the investigation around the 2 attackers, what was known about them, the intelligence picture in Australia. Were there any potential warnings and clues that may have been missed on?
And indeed, I mean, just in case people are still just joining us, Mark, I mean, we know that this happened around 6:40 p.m. local time. 2 gunmen involved, as you said, Mark, 12 dead, 29 injured, a child and a police officer among the dead, sadly. One suspect, as you pointed out there, Naveed Akram, 24, from Bonnyrigg in Sydney, but of Pakistan descent. Mark, obviously night has now fallen in Australia. Do we know any more about a suspected third attacker? We understand that Naveed Akram's house has been searched. Do we have any more information on a potential third attacker?
No information beyond the fact that there were some initial reports that what often happens in these fast-moving, marauding attacks, be they knife attacks, gun attacks, vehicle-borne attacks, is people get panicked and confused, understandably, with all the chaos. They might see, you know, for instance, someone rushing to help and, you know, mistake that in their mind's eye as potentially a suspect. So all of that gets reported in, disseminated by the police, and they have to check everything out. I'm not convinced, to be honest, that they're taking the threat of a third person particularly seriously, but out of an abundance of caution, they are looking into those potential reports. But at this hour, as you say, approaching 1 in the morning in Sydney, the slow time gathering of evidence is now underway as the injured are in hospital being treated. 29 of those all described as being in serious condition.
Awful. Thank you very much for now. That's Home Secretary Mark White. Thank you very much for bringing us up to date on the live breaking story. OK, now let's talk to Telegraph columnist Jake Wallace-Simmons. Jake, thank you very much for joining me. Awful day. What do you make of the events of today?
Well, it feels to me, sadly, as if there was a grim inevitability about these attacks. For many years, the Australian Jewish community has been warning the government about rising anti-Semitism against them, particularly, of course, since October the 7th. There was a firebombing of a Melbourne synagogue about a year ago or so. And even this week, a local rabbi reported that he and his children had been targeted by a woman on a train who was shouting at them, "Get to the gas chambers." This sort of stuff has become almost part of life for Australia's Jewish community, which has felt very besieged and very beleaguered and not really supported by the government. Let's not forget the Anthony Albanese government has recognised a Palestinian state, as has our own here in Britain as well, which has been perceived by many people as support for Hamas. So that's how Jews in Australia have been feeling. And this latest attack is just the horrendous culmination of that rise in anti-Semitism and in anti-Semitic propaganda all over the world, not least in Britain as well. Jews, I think, all around the world have been sensing that something like this was on the cards, was inevitable, because the propaganda has been of staggering proportions. Jews and Israelis being associated with being baby killers, with being murderers, with being warmongers, and so on and so forth. There's only so much of that stuff that can enter the bloodstream of society before people begin to act. And the Manchester killer, of course, in the Manchester synagogue attack, shouted out something on the lines of, "This is revenge for you killing children." So this propaganda gets under people's skin, and a few people do act out in this way. So really, it's a day of mourning, of course, and of shock, but certainly there's a sense of inevitability surrounding it as well.
Jake, why do you think the governments, both in Australia and here, which are a similar political slant, allow people to target restaurants and synagogues and Jewish homes with chants of, you know, globalise the intifada and from the river to the sea, which we're also used to hearing now? We're almost tone deaf to what it actually means. Why does our government allow this to happen?
That's a very good question. I mean, globalise the Intifada is a bloodthirsty chant. The Intifada, the second Intifada, involved 140 suicide bombs on Israeli streets, blowing up largely children on their way to school for a lot of the time. If that's what we want to globalise here in Britain, then that's a really depraved position, and it's one that should be taken more seriously. But the problem is that our affinity for free speech and for the pillars of an open society is being exploited by the very people who wish to undo that open society and replace it with something far more authoritarian, Sharia or Islamic law, and their radical progressive allies. So they're sort of manipulating our values of free speech against us. But let's not forget that there's been some stories of great heroism today in Australia, which sort of counterbalances all that depravity. Three in particular. There was my friend Arsen Ostrovsky, who was shot in the head but survived a glancing blow to the head, who gave an interview directly afterwards, covered in blood, to television, where he said, we've lived through worse, we're going to live through this, and we're going to get the people who did this. There was a woman called Jess, only named as Jess so far, who protected a 3-year-old girl who she didn't know with her body and took a bullet to save her life. And of course, there was that iconic hero named as Ahmed al-Ahmed, 43 years old, who disarmed one of the attackers with his bare hands. That video has gone viral, and he, of course, was a Muslim. So there are a lot of notes of hope in amongst all this devastation, but you're totally right to point out that the anti-Semitism has been indulged by our governments, and this seems to be the deplorable result.
And Jake, I think that is a really good point to make, that, I mean, without sounding too soppy about it, that love does conquer all, and most people are good people, and most people want to live side by side peacefully. And as you say, the heroes we're showing on your screen now, the hero who tackled one of the gunmen, sort of rugby tackled him to the ground and got the gun from him and potentially saved lives. There are so many more good people than bad people.
Well, he absolutely, definitely saved lives. I think we can say that for sure. I wouldn't say that love conquers all, but certainly resilience and defiance conquers all, and knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what your values are. And that doesn't, of course, preclude Muslims. Muslims are perfectly situated within that moral compass as well. And, if you look at Israel, on October the 7th, Muslims gave their lives for their Jewish compatriots. Muslims fight in the IDF against Hamas. And Muslims have supported the Jewish victims and the Israeli people on October the 7th and in the immediate aftermath of that. But I would be careful about saying most or all or quantities, because it's difficult to know how many people hold what views, and those things are movable factors anyway. But certainly this is not a case of Islam against the West, in my view. This is a case of evil against the forces of goodness. And unfortunately, evil has a great foothold within Muslim society overall around the world. There's a battle within Muslim society of political Islam or Islamism, jihadism, against the mainstream. And it's one that decent people must stand against and must win, whether Muslim or non-Muslim.
Jake, how do our government encourage us to do that?
Well, I think that we are living in a time of great comfort and great indolence. The government has recently basically taxed workers more to funnel more money towards people who are not working. If that's the climate of our country, people are not going to have the self-respect and the resilience and the get-up-and-go spirit that is required when you're under threat. Our government needs to begin restoring those values, restoring our patriotism, restoring our sense of duty towards one another and our duty towards society and our pride in Britain and our values and what we stand for. It needs to start cracking down properly on those extremists and subversives who seek to divide us, repressing them, imprisoning them, deporting them, and welcoming people who are on our side so that we can come together and fight jointly against this menace. We're only seeing the beginning of this global jihad, really. I mean, I know it's been going on since 9/11, perhaps even before, but it's only gaining pace with each passing year, combined with the threat from Russia. We're in a much more serious situation than we think, and the solution has got to be to find our social coherence and resilience before it's too late.
Jake, thank you very much. Very strong, wise words indeed. That's Telegraph columnist Jake Wallace-Simmons there. OK, if you are just joining us, it's just gone 2 o'clock. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News. And just to recap, at least 12 people have been killed following a mass shooting by 2 gunmen at Bondi Beach in Sydney, with 29 currently in hospital. One of the gunmen is among the dead, and footage from the scene shows a man, a hero, I think, wresting a pump-action shotgun from a gunman. The attack happened as people celebrated the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. In a press conference, the New South Wales Police Premier Chris Mims said that one of the gunmen had been killed and another was in custody.
2 individuals began firing on a crowded group of families on Bondi Beach at Archer Park. This cowardly act of terrifying violence is shocking and painful to see and represents some of our worst fears about terrorism in Sydney. I very sadly need to report that as of now, there are at least 12 individuals that have been killed. One of the offenders has also been killed and one is in custody. This attack was designed to target Sydney's Jewish community on the first day of Hanukkah.
Australian police say they are currently investigating if there is a third offender. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said the evil that was unleashed at Bondi Beach today is beyond comprehension.
This afternoon, there has been a devastating terrorist incident at Bondi at the Hanukkah by the Sea celebration. This is a targeted attack on Jewish Australians on the first day of Hanukkah, which should be a day of joy, a celebration of faith. An act of evil anti-Semitism, terrorism that has struck the heart of our nation. An attack on Jewish Australians is an attack on every Australian, and every Australian tonight will be, like me, devastated.
More than 50 gunshots were heard as hundreds of people fled the scene in Sydney at around 6:40 local time.
Ran onto the beach. I guess everyone ran onto the beach. It was pretty terrifying. And yeah, I eventually went back to see what was happening. A few people helped a few old people get up and get out of there, but it was like there were lots of bodies on the floor.
There's been plenty of reaction here in the UK, with the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, saying it is deeply distressing news and described it as an appalling attack. Meanwhile, London Mayor Sadiq Khan has announced that extra officers from the Metropolitan Police will be on the streets of London following the attack, saying, "My thoughts and condolences, along with the rest of London, are with everyone affected by the horrific attack at Bondi Beach, Australia today." Meanwhile, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has reacted to the tragic events in Australia, saying the Hanukkah party shooting in Australia is horrendous. The threat is everywhere.
Genuinely horrendous. Last I hear, it's 10 dead and many, many wounded. I did see some video of an heroic Australian, taking the gun out of the hands of one of these terrorists. Desperately sorry for the Jewish community in Sydney, which is quite considerable. But equally, you realise actually the threat to the Jewish people is everywhere. It's not just in Manchester or in parts of North London, it's all over the world. And there is this real poison.
Earlier, we were joined by Sky News Australia journalist Shari Markson, who was speaking to us live from Bondi Beach.
Police have this evening confirmed that they did find explosive devices in a car on Canberra Parade here on Bondi. It's just the main road behind us. So we don't know what that explosive device was intended to be used for. There were about 50 or 60 shots. This went on for a number of minutes. I'm a Jewish Australian. I've been reporting on the anti-Semitism crisis every single day for the past 2 years. I've been imploring the federal government, the Prime Minister, to take action. He hasn't taken enough action on the anti-Semitism that we've seen explode in the wake of October 7. Even our anti-Semitism envoy handed down a report with recommendations 3 or 4 months ago. He still hasn't acted on those recommendations, hasn't even said he will accept them. So the Jewish community has been vulnerable. We've been like sitting ducks here. It's not a surprise that something like this has happened. We've been warning that a serious event, that lives would be lost if the authorities didn't take anti-Semitism seriously, and they just didn't. They didn't act on it. because of local domestic political issues. We had a federal election here in May. Some of the marginal seats that were in question are in areas that have a large Muslim community. So the ministers of this Labor government didn't want to be seen to be talking about anti-Semitism so much. It's left us very vulnerable. We have already been living in fear and anxiety. It's the first day of Hanukkah here in Australia. I was at a similar Hanukkah celebration just up the road from the one that was targeted tonight. Families, I mean, I've been here since this afternoon. I've been interviewing people who are on the scene, people who lost family members or whose family members were shot, parents whose 3-year-old little girl went missing and they found her under the body of a woman who'd been shot. You know, she took the bullet to save this 3-year-old girl who she didn't even know, to save that 3-year-old girl's life after she became separated from her parents. This is the worst massacre we've had in Australia since Port Arthur. This is absolutely devastating. Our country will never be the same. Our Jewish community will never be the same. No one's going to feel safe. If this can happen at Bondi, the iconic Bondi Beach, it can happen anywhere.
That's a very passionate Sky News Australia journalist, Shari Markson there, who was speaking to us live from Bondi Beach earlier today. And you can hear in her voice what it actually means. And I can also hear, chillingly, similarities between Australia and the UK when it comes to elections and how votes are won. Let's put it that way. In any case, let's find out the latest on the actual breaking story. Joining us now is Home and Security Editor Mark White. Mark, any more news for us?
Yeah, we're getting a bit more detail on the man you're looking at there who wrestled that shotgun away from one of the gunmen. An incredible story of bravery, really was. He's a local shopkeeper, a fruit and veg seller by the name of Ahmed, a 43-year-old man. As I say, we were showing you the images of him going in very bravely, running through the parked cars there and just tackling a gunman who would just a split second earlier was opening fire on the crowds at the Hanukkah celebration there, and then pointing the gun at the gunman, ensuring that that gunman sidles off, I think, then puts his shotgun down and picks up a stone and throws it at the gunman as well. You know, knowing that the police were turning up, I'm sure wanting to ensure that the gun was not in his hands at that time. Sadly, he was shot, though, because he was hiding behind that palm tree where the gunman had been just moments earlier opening fire from. As the gunman's colleague, the other shooter on the bridge, was firing down towards him, and we're told that this 43-year-old shopkeeper was wounded in the leg and the shoulder. So he is one of the 29 people with serious injuries now being treated in hospital, but obviously we do wish him a safe and speedy recovery after the incredible action. Undoubtedly saved more lives, because that gunman at that time was right down there in amongst the people that were trying to take shelter and to, you know, avoid the hail of bullets. But he'd come down off the bridge where he was with the other attacker to get up close to try and pick off more people at that Hanukkah event. So undoubtedly the actions of this local shopkeeper saved more lives there. We can tell you as well, again, about the attacker there that you see on the bridge. That is 24-year-old Navid Akram. We've got his driving license that we can show you as well, that was recovered from the scene. Now, we don't know if Navid Akram is one of the shooters that was injured or was killed, because we know that one of the shooters was fatally injured and the other shooter, according to the police, was shot, was critically injured. But they have intelligence on at least one of the shooters as well, in terms of the person was known to the security services. Mike Burgess, who is the spy chief, if you like, the head of intelligence in Australia, said that one of the gunmen was known to the security services. He added, though, that they don't believe that he was known in terms of any information suggesting he was posing an immediate, imminent threat, but he was known to the security services. So all of that will have to be, in the fullness of time, explored to determine, as we always have to do after these terrible tragedies, whether actually there were opportunities that maybe should have been acted on and were missed. To that end, we've been hearing from sources that the Israeli intelligence service Mossad had warned the Australian authorities on a number of occasions in recent months about a growing threat to Australia's Jewish community, a threat that, according to Mossad, was being instigated, encouraged, potentially funded by Iran. But we don't know at this stage how seriously the Australians took the threat, whether they followed up on that intelligence, but clearly that is of concern as well. We know right around the globe, Dawn, that the Jewish community has faced a significant uptick in the threat that they face ever since the massacre on October the 7th 2 years ago. And that threat has only grown with, here in this country, just recently the attack on the synagogue in Manchester by another Islamist attacker on that occasion, and multiple other incidents in countries right around the world. There is growing concern amongst the Jewish community that they are being targeted. But add to that the fact that at this time of the year, in the build up to Christmas, that is a huge Christian festival with that brings with it an increased terror threat every year. We see, for instance, Christmas markets targeted on a regular basis in countries around the world. In fact, our own Charlie Peters passed me some information about a German operation to arrest 5 people just in the last day in connection with a plot to cause a terrorist attack, to carry out a terrorist attack at a Christmas market in southern Bavaria. So there is a threat out there as well to the wider Christian community as well as the Jewish community. And as we build up to the very special time of year for where we have, of course, all of these festivals and large numbers of people gathering, that's when that threat level is seen to be most acute. So the police and security services on their guard here in the UK and elsewhere. We know that the Metropolitan Police, for instance, are increasing their patrols throughout the Jewish community in London and also in the likes of Trafalgar Square, where there are Hanukkah celebrations that take place. They begin this evening to mark this special event.
Thank you very much. That's Home Security at GB News for us now, Mark. Thank you very much. A really tough day. And if you are just joining us, we're talking about the Bondi Beach Hanukkah party massacre, which has left 12 dead, including a child, 29 injured. 1 gunman is dead, 1 in custody and injured as well. It happened at 6:40 local time in Australia. It's now, I believe, about 1:15 in the morning in Australia. It's lots of reaction coming in from around the world. world, obviously, but it was a very clearly a targeted attack. 2 gunmen, possibly a third, we're not sure, and an improvised explosive device was found in the car or van that they travelled in there with. As you heard Mark refer there, that security has been increased around Hanukkah celebrations in the UK, including Mayor Sadiq Khan in London, saying that extra officers will patrol Jewish communities ahead of Hanukkah events. All I would say to that is we shouldn't need to put extra security around Jewish communities, should we? This is 2025. They should be allowed to go about their business like everybody else. Any case, joining me now is Professor of Politics at Deakin University, Josh Roos. Josh, good to see you. Thank you very much for joining me. Josh, it's such an awful happening, one that sadly no one I've spoken to this morning or today seems shocked by. What do you make of that?
Yeah, look, unfortunately, it's entirely predictable, given the political climate in Australia over the last couple of years. And it's a climate in which there's been a pervasive anti-Semitism across our political discourse. And it's really increased. I mean, you would have thought it would have dissipated a little bit in the aftermath of the end of the war in Gaza, but it's actually not only stayed the same, but in the context of international events, even increased.
And Josh, we have noticed there was for the first time ever, a J7 meeting task force held in Australia. I mean, and that's the first time it's ever happened. And, you know, that means that, the largest community from Jewish community from countries around the world, including the UK. And Australia has seen the largest spike in anti-Semitic attacks of all those J7 countries, which are Argentina, Australia, Canada, France, Germany, UK, and the USA. Why has it seen such a large spike in Australia in particular?
Australia has a really unique dynamic to our politics. Our current government is obviously to the left of the spectrum, the Labor Party, but they're governed by the socialist left of the faction of the Labor Party. And to that extent, our Prime Minister at one point was the founder of the Students for Palestine group. The hard left of the party, particularly avowedly pro-Palestinian in their orientation. And so there's been a lot of suspicion around claims to pervasive anti-Semitism and an attempt to balance anti-Semitism against other forms of racism. Now, absolutely other forms of racism exist and need to be dealt with. However, this particular threat in the aftermath of October 7 has been really, really severe and yet not been taken seriously or given the credence it deserves.
Josh, in the streets of the UK, London, Manchester, all our big cities, we see pro-Palestine marches where you hear phrases like globalise the intifada, from the river to the sea, and something far worse that, I can't even repeat on TV and radio today. Is that similar in Australia? You see those kind of marches and that kind of language?
Yeah, we've seen significantly worse than that at Australian protests. And again, people have the right to protest and hold those views. Hold their views. However, those extreme views were quite prevalent at many of these protests. There were signs comparing Zionists to Nazis and many other far more extreme manifestations of anti-Jewish hate. And to that extent, there's been very little in the way of political leadership condemning that framing, nor has there been an effort to crack down on the leftist anti-Semitism we've seen emerge in the same way that they've been quite prepared and quite active in targeting extreme right anti-Semitism.
I'm staggered that, nothing happened. In Australia, on the streets of the UK, when you have people spouting basically pure racist hatred. There's no other way to describe it. I mean, it just begs the question, is this about free Palestine, as many claim, or is it simply about murder the Jews?
Well, there's a deep anti-Jewish hatred that's become really open. I didn't think I'd see it in my lifetime, and I certainly didn't think I would see it as a scholar from the directions that I'm seeing it. We know that anti-Semitism comes from extremes, be it the neo-Nazis or be it the communists historically as well. But what we've seen is that it's become particularly prevalent in that intersection of Islamist anti-colonialism, as they frame it, and so on, and then that hard left sort of socialist revolutionary anti-colonialist sort of sentiment. And so we've seen this intersection, and it's been playing out in our universities, it's been playing out in our politics, and it's really got to be, there's got to be an open and very assertive questioning of what the hell is going on that's allowing this to fester in a climate in which democracies globally are facing significant challenges.
Do you think, I mean, it might be a bit dramatic to say so, Josh, but do you think the government, both in Australia and in UK, might just occasionally be thought to have blood on their hands?
Look, I'm not going to say that. I do think, however, that there's been a significant underestimation of the threat. And I think whilst they don't necessarily have a level of malevolence that would support this sort of action, I think their failure to take it seriously over a prolonged period of time requires serious interrogation, and people need to be held to account.
Josh, thank you very much for joining me on an incredibly difficult day. That's Josh Roos, who's Professor Dawn of Politics at Deakin University. OK, please, as I said, gbnews.com/your say if you want to join in this conversation. I understand a lot of you want to talk. If you're worried, if you're scared, we are here to talk to you as well. So please do get in touch. Now, let's talk to a friend of the programme, journalist Angela Epstein. Angela, good to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. Angela, another day, another attack on people simply because they are of the Jewish faith. How are you feeling today?
Feeling absolutely heartsick. Thank you, Dawn, for all the people who were there, who were involved, who have been bereaved or injured. I'm talking to you from Manchester, where, as you know, only in October, we saw Jewish people killed just because they were worshippers going to the synagogue on Yom Kippur. Tonight is the first night of our festival of Hanukkah, the festival of light, when we light candles. This was a communal event where people were coming together to light the candles of the menorah. Mine is ready behind me, just to welcome in a beautiful festival. I've been to these places before where you do them outside. I've got some loved ones staying with me at the moment who go to Sydney a lot. They've been to that playground. They know little kids that might have been there on another day. And it touches us to the quick, because once again, as your previous contributor said, Jewish people are being targeted simply for being Jewish. These are unapologetic hate crimes. This isn't legitimate criticism of the Israeli government for how they may or may not be prosecuting the war in Gaza. This is another example of the malevolent wave of anti-Semitism sweeping across the globe, making Jews fear for their safety when they go to restaurants, when they go to pray, where they enjoy a lovely communal, peaceful activity. And, you know, it starts with the Jews, but it never finishes there. And this should be a matter of outrage for anybody who has a moral compass and believes in the right of ordinary people to live peacefully.
Angela, talking of moral compasses, I mean, we've seen some horrific marches on our streets. I mean, there was 2 restaurants, one, ironically, in Australia, one in London, targeted just on Friday night.
Yes.
And they were protesters organised by the pro-Palestinian protest groups. And they were just targeting people eating their dinner with phrases like globalise the Intifada and sort of like from the river to the sea and far worse things. Nothing was done, Angela. People trying to eat their dinner were targeted and nothing was done.
Yeah, I know. And there's 2 things going on here, Dawn. First of all, we've got a level of 2-tier policing, as we've seen Jewish people being told to stay away from things because it might be difficult for them. Famously, at the Aston Villa versus Maccabi football match, in which Jewish people in this country were told you're not allowed to go to a football match rather than dealing with those who may cause intimidation or worse. And second of all, we've got a lame duck government that sort of squeaks pathetically every now and then, saying the right things, but it's just not landing. The moment that Keir Starmer, recognised the Palestinian state when Hamas was still holding hostages in Gaza, gave such amplification and horsepower to anti-Semitism, because it says it's okay. Make no mistake, these protests are not about legitimate conversations about 2-state solutions and how we resolve the tensions in the Middle East. Post October 7th, The worst attack on a group of Jewish people in terms of numbers since the Holocaust in a single day unleashed anti-Semitism around the world. The day after, there were protests before Israel had even gone into Gaza or fired a single shot. All of this tells us one thing. This is a war against Jewish people and ultimately on the West as well. It has nothing to do with politics and everything to do with hatred. This is not a country I want to live in. I'm sure viewers will not want to live in a place like this too.
Angela, you just preempted my next question. We earlier on in the programme interviewed someone from the Israeli government, a former member of the Israeli government, who was saying that, you know, Jews should head back to Israel. Europe is not safe for them. Australia is not safe for them. I mean, what would your response to that be?
So my response is this. I have family that live in Israel. I have family that live around the world who have been having these conversations. I love Britain. I was born here. My grandfather came here at the turn of the century to escape persecution and pogroms in Ukraine. And Britain provided sanctuary, and the Jewish community flourished here. They became part in every aspect of life. They wanted to assimilate and they wanted to contribute to society. My grandfather signed up. He was naturalized and fought in the First World War. He was a stretcher bearer because of his gratitude to this country. And I bear that, you know, whispers in my ear when I think about fleeing. You know, all you do then is you allow, if you flee, then you give those who propagate hate and propagate hate in a practical way, as we saw in Australia, license to carrying on doing that. This is my country. I'm as British as I am Jewish. Yes, I hate it that the fact that all our Jewish schools are surrounded by fences and security guards and restaurants are and shops are. There's communal events this evening for Hanukkah. I imagine the security will be absolutely, you know, at the sharp end. But why should I be driven out of this country? That is not the way to resolve the situation. I have every sympathy with those that want to go, but for the moment, I'm not going anywhere.
It does to me. Obviously, I'm not Jewish, as you know, Angela, but to me, it does have chilling echoes of 1930s Germany in 2025, Australia and the UK.
Well, I've tried. Yeah, and you're right, Dawn. And I've tried to resist going down that rabbit hole when it's been discussed over previous weeks, or you know, as the anti-Semitism has escalated. This idea of we're in a similar kind of waiting room to the Jews of Germany in 1933, and obviously, consequently, the rest of Europe. That, you know, the burning of books is similar to the eradicating of cultural events. It's like the Eurovision. Jews are being excluded from cultural life, which has nothing to do with politics. And yet, one of the things about history is we listen to the warnings from history. I only hope that this time, because everybody knows about it, you know, Germany operated quite to a degree under the radar in the Second World War. A lot of the information about what they did during the Holocaust didn't come out till after the Second World War. And obviously there were warnings which were ignored. Now we all know what's going on. We all know. And I hope that decent, ordinary people are in the majority to stop this, to stand up to it, to speak out, to reach out to their politicians and their Jewish friends. But part of the problem is people are frightened. They're frightened because they see what those who hate Jewish people and consequently the West are prepared to do, what extremists are prepared to do.
Angela, we had a commentator in Australia earlier saying that this is about the way the Australian government have treated the rise of anti-Semitism, the largest spike in anti-Semitic acts of all the J7 countries, indeed. But the way the government has treated it there is about votes. It's about winning over those votes in the Muslim community. Do you think you can see echoes of the same thing in the UK?
Definitely, without question. Look, we've got a Prime Minister who campaigned not once but twice for Jeremy Corbyn to be leader, when he was presiding over systematic, institutionalised anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, the only party other than the British National Party to be investigated by the Equality and Human Rights Commission because of what was going on there. And Starmer twice said he would serve in his cabinet. He called him a friend. Then we know he recognised the Palestinian state without any conditions when Hamas was still holding hostages. And we've heard from the testimony of the hostages that have been released the absolute barbarism and monstrous behaviour that they had to deal with and experience. But this is a Prime Minister who is concerned with his electoral numbers. Jewish people are less than 0.5% of the population in this country. Other demographics are much more significant. He's looking at the numbers. He knows that Labour didn't win the last election. The Conservatives lost it. Labour polled fewer votes in than they ever have since the Second World War. So he recognises the fragile territory of the electoral landscape, and he's looking after his own skin. And all the messages on Twitter, you know, they're so tin-eared. He put out a message this morning, or rather his social media people did on Twitter, about wishing the Jewish people a happy Hanukkah. This was when news was already coming out about what had happened in Australia. Nobody had even bothered to join the dots up. Weak leadership sometimes is worse than strong leadership moving in the wrong direction, because it appeases, and that's where we're up to.
Angela, I'm glad you mentioned that tweet actually as well. That remained up for quite a while this story was breaking. Angela, celebrate Hanukkah and stay safe. Thank you very much, Angela Epstein. That's journalist Angela Epstein joining us there. Okay, just to recap, if you are just joining us, I am Dawn Neeson, this is GBNews, and at least 12 people have been killed following a mass shooting by 2 gunmen at Bondi Beach in Sydney, with 29 currently in hospital. One of the gunmen is among the dead. Footage from the scene shows a very brave man, as you can see in the film there, wresting a pump-action shotgun from one of the gunmen. That was a local greengrocer, who's a 43-year-old. The attack happened as people celebrated the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. In a press conference, the New South Wales Police Premier Chris Mims said that one of the gunmen had been killed and the other was in custody.
2 individuals began firing on a crowded group of families on Bondi Beach at Archer Park. This cowardly act of terrifying violence is shocking and painful to see, and represents some of our worst fears about terrorism in Sydney. I very sadly need to report that as of now, there are at least 12 individuals that have been killed. One of the offenders has also been killed and one is in custody. This attack was designed to target Sydney's Jewish community on the first day of Hanukkah.
Australian police say are currently investigating if there was a third offender. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the evil that was unleashed at Bondi Beach today is beyond comprehension.
This afternoon, there has been a devastating terrorist incident at Bondi at the Hanukkah by the Sea celebration. This is a targeted attack on Jewish Australians on the first day of Hanukkah, which should be a day of joy, a celebration of faith. An act of evil anti-Semitism, terrorism, that has struck the heart of our nation. An attack on Jewish Australians is an attack on every Australian, and every Australian tonight will be, like me, devastated.
There's been plenty of reaction here in the UK as well, with the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, saying it is deeply distressing news and describing it as an appalling attack. Meanwhile, London Mayor Sadiq Khan has announced that extra officers from the Metropolitan Police will be on the streets of London following the attack. My thoughts and condolences, along with the rest of London, are with everyone affected by the horrific attack at Bondi Beach, Australia today. OK, now, joining me now is former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence, Chip Chapman. Chip, good to see you. Thank you very much for joining me. Chip, horrific news from Australia. Sadly, nobody I've spoken to in the course of the past few hours seems that surprised that this has actually happened. What do you make of that?
Well, lots of people say an attack is inevitable, but the reality for Australia, and the same for the UK, is that the National Terrorism Threat Advisory System level at the moment for Australia is the same as it is in the UK. In the UK at the moment, it's substantial. Attack is likely. In Australia, it is probable. An attack is likely. The same. That's level 3 of 5. So unless you really define the time, of course, an attack is always inevitable, so it doesn't actually help you very much. What is clear is that there's been more extremism and hate crime since 7/7, and there has been this globalised sort of intifada, and these mass events, crowded places, as we call them in counter-terrorist terms, should be secured to a level where these things can't happen. But there's a number of fundamental questions you would ask here. The first one is, of course, that this is the greatest loss of life in an attack like this since the 1996 Port Arthur attack in Australia, which led to amongst the strictest gun control measures in the world. So how did a number of people manage to get a number of what we call long-barreled weapons, essentially rifles? That's unusual, highly unusual. So that's unusual. So then you would ask, is there another attack coming? Is there a network? What role did the community play? Because if you've got 2 or 3 people involved in this, someone in the community knew, there would be a circle of plotters, there was likely to be leakage, and there would also be probably a road to radicalization, because this has been called a terrorist attack, and it's either for religious reasons or ideological reasons linked to Islamism or obviously anti-Semitism, or both. And also, of course, what mistakes did the officials make? Why was this not secured? And ultimately, what new authorities or laws or changes are required by the Australians to ensure that this doesn't happen again?
I mean, Australia, I believe, not so long ago did introduce significantly upped their anti-terrorism laws, but that doesn't seem to have made any difference.
Well, having the law doesn't by itself make any difference. I mean, we've heard, for example, that one of at least the 2 protagonists were known to authorities. Now, that again is not necessarily a useful term unless they were high on a counter-terrorist radar. So, for example, you'd be known to authorities if you had a criminal background. And what is clear in this case is even if he was known to authorities, he was not high on a counter-terrorist prioritization grid where he would have been surveilled. So that would have been one of the things that they'll look at. But even in the modern age, with all this sort of artificial intelligence and machine learning that you put to people who are subjects of interest, it's very difficult to predict the outcomes of people when they will go from a radicalized posture to one where they take executive terrorist action and kill people. That is a highly unusual thing still, and very difficult to predict.
But I mean, Chap, there's no doubt in your mind that this was an organised, pre-planned attack. We have, as I said, 2 attackers, and that we believe there was an improvised explosive device found in their car as well.
Yeah, and absolutely. And if you look at the selection of the ground, it's sort of they're on the higher ground above where the Hanukkah ceremony took place. I mean, I know the ground. My son sort of lives in Sydney and was just going by at the time. He was also involved in the Westfield Bondi attack last year. He was there at the time. So I'm familiar with the ground. In a way, this is the worst case, because in terms of high numbers who are killed and low numbers who are killed in terrorist attacks, what we really worry about, or the authorities worry about, are bombs and long-barreled weapons. It is those that kill lots of people. And here we had both improvised explosive devices, bombs, which fortunately didn't go off, and long-barreled weapons. Why they like long-barreled weapons is it gives you range, the standoff distance, in the way that a short-barreled weapon, a pistol, would not. So, people do get killed in bladed weapon attacks, as they did in the Westfield Bondi Junction attack last year. That was a mental health thing rather than a terrorist thing, and in vehicle and as a weapon attacks. But it's bombs and long-barrel weapons which kill the most people, and that's what we've seen here with the figures at the moment, with 11 friendly forces, as it were, killed and 29 wounded, along with the gunman who also seems to be killed. But I wouldn't put him in the numbers. He's just someone we should forget.
Chip, many people I've spoken to today have drawn parallels between the government in Australia and the government of the UK, also the rise in anti-Semitism, the fact that we've seen some fairly horrific attacks on Jewish people in this country, and the marches where we've had signs, globalise the Intifada, literally death to Jews in some cases as well, and from the river to the sea, which goes without saying these days. What now should the UK government do to ensure this doesn't happen here?
Well, we've already seen a number of things which have occurred since 7/7, really. So there's been far more referrals by people to the counter-terrorist internet referral unit. There's been far more referrals to the Prevent hotline. There's been far more referrals to the counter-terrorist hotline. So it is this thing, and normally we hear about this at Christmas, of action counters terrorism. So if you've got any idea that someone is on the road to radicalization or is in a position where you think he or she might be a threat, then tell the police. And that might be the final fragment of piece of intelligence, which links with other pieces of intelligence, which may prevent these sorts of things happening. No piece of intelligence or information is too obscure to not necessarily be useful.
I mean, Chip, as you rightly point out, we are coming up to Christmas. There are Christmas markets all over the country. Hanukkah goes on until the 22nd of December. There is lots of celebrating. Should be a very joyous time of year. Sadiq Khan has said extra officers will patrol Jewish community ahead of those Hanukkah events. How confident are you that our security services in this country, as run down as they have been financially, are capable of dealing with this kind of threat?
Well, I'm pretty confident that we can deal with these threats, particularly Christmas markets. There's a lot of standoff security there to prevent certainly vehicle as a weapon attacks, which have been the predominant ones around Christmas markets, particularly in Germany. And of course, the Liverpool attack, which wasn't a vehicle as a weapon by a terrorist, was the same sort of thing. So I'm pretty confident they can do that. But of course, what was unusual here and the thing that could get through in the UK is normally the very difficult people to predict are the lone actors. That's why this is 2 or 3 people is something where I think there should have been leakage and should have been probably picked up. I can almost guarantee 99.9% that if there's a significant and sophisticated plot in the UK involving 2 or more people with weapons and ammunition and potentially bombs, that it would probably, most of the time, that 99.9%, as I said, be picked up by the security authorities. What is difficult is that lone actor to pick up.
And Chip, the government in Australia have been taken to task over this. They haven't done enough to protect the Jewish community. Would you say the same applies to the British government?
Well, certainly they haven't been as robust as they should have been, and we hear all this stuff about two-tier policing, all that. The police do have the powers to certainly ban marches if they want to, and there's this mismatch, I guess, between what is freedom of speech and when does hate crime go into the sphere where you have to ban things. That's a fine judgment for anyone in a democracy. That's for the police to take, along with the Home Office, whether they're put the cursor in the right place. I suspect they haven't.
It is worrying times for everybody, obviously. Where do we go from here, Chip? Can you see the situation getting worse before it gets better?
Well, one would hope that it would get better, because hopefully in the new year we should be going to phase 2 of the peace plan in Gaza. So in terms of people, blowing things up in support of a Palestinian cause, we don't know at the moment whether this was actually the Palestinian cause. We know it was anti-Semitism as a minimum, and that's difficult. And it's worth noting, of course, it was only 24 hours ago that 3 US soldiers were killed in Syria. So Islamic State hasn't gone away. So the notion of jihadist Salafism is still there and vibrant in the world. It's not the same as it was from 2014 to sort of 2019, in that period when there was this governance from Baghdadi and his acolytes, but there is still a terrorist threat from Salafist jihadists in the world, as there are still, of course, from other groups as well, including right-wing terrorists and left anarchist and single-issue terrorists, which is the way that it's now defined by MI5.
And Chip, do you think the fact that both the Australian government and the UK government recognise Palestine as a state gives strength to the people that are doing this sort of thing?
Well, my own personal view is it's absolutely too premature, and that you had to see significant actions by certainly Hamas, because you're rewarding terrorism by going down that route. I mean, let's be clear, Hamas is still an exterminationist group which wants to see the destruction of Israel, in the same way that the antagonists today who did the attack on Bondi Beach were exterminationists who wanted to kill as many Jewish people as they could today.
And Chip, just finally, a bit of advice for anyone of whatever faith going out and about in our cities and our towns, going to Christmas markets, celebrating Hanukkah, going Christmas shopping, travelling around on public transport. What advice would you give to them?
Always be vigilant, and as the British Transport Police say on their earworms, you know, see it, say it, see it, say it. And, you know, tell people, be vigilant. And if you think anything is untoward, then do call the counter-terrorist hotline on 0800 789 321.
Chip, thank you very much for joining us today. That's former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence, Chip Chapman there. And wise words indeed. Be vigilant, but terrorism works by terrorising us, stopping us going about our daily lives. So, you know, the best advice is to be vigilant, but go out there and live your normal lives. OK, joining me now is Israeli-American journalist Emily Schrader. Emily, always good to talk to you. Obviously, on a day like today, the horrors of anti-Semitism come back to haunt us. What are your thoughts about what's happened today?
You know, it's obviously it's devastating, and actually one of my colleagues, Arsen Ostrovsky, is one of the victims. He was injured in this attack. He's okay. He's hospitalized, but just to see the impact of this is really devastating to see. And while I'm not completely surprised, because there's been a lot of tolerance for extremism, unfortunately, I'm obviously devastated by what I saw. In the initial moments that I started receiving footage, before I received a formal news update, I actually thought that people were resending footage from October 7th at the Nova massacre at the music festival, only to realize, to my horror, that it was in fact another terror attack against the Jewish community.
But as I say, Emily, that everyone I've spoken to today, they're not surprised. And this is the worrying thing. It's like many in the Jewish community go, well, we were kind of expecting it to come. So what is it with governments that are allowing it to happen?
Well, I think that the Jewish community has been sounding the alarm about the tolerance of intolerance for quite a while, in particular in the aftermath of October 7th. We saw on October 8th in the UK, in Australia, in the United States, and in Canada, protests against Israel. Now, I remind your viewers that Israel never responded to October 7th until more than 2 weeks after the massacre actually took place. So what exactly were they protesting? This is just an example of the type of radicalism that we're seeing. It isn't pro-Palestinian. It's not helping the pro-Palestinians. It's not preventing war. It's not doing anything in favor of the Gazan people. But what it is doing is supporting terrorism, which is in fact oppressing Palestinians, and fomenting anti-Semitism that manifests in attacks on Jewish communities, just as we saw in Manchester on Yom Kippur, just as we saw today in Australia.
The protests we have seen on the streets of Australia and on the streets of the UK with the Free Palestine banners. I mean, is that just another way of saying murder Jews?
Well, I can't speak for a banner that says Free Palestine, but what I can speak for is the calls for intifada, which literally means in Arabic a violent uprising, and also the calls to globalize the intifada, which is one of the common chants that we've heard. Just yesterday, we heard it in the UK at one of these protests. This is what globalizing the intifada looks like. We know here in Israel, we experienced multiple intifadas. It looks like blowing up buses, blowing up pizzerias, murdering children, all in the name of some extremist movement. And that is exactly what we're seeing now. We saw it in the UK, as I mentioned, on Yom Kippur, and we're seeing it in Australia as well. And unfortunately, this is the natural byproduct when you see thousands of people gathering to protest not against Israel, but against Jews. We heard chants on October 8th in 2023. We heard chants calling for F the Jews, where are the Jews, Khaybar Ya Yehud, which refers to the massacre of the Jews of Khaybar in Saudi Arabia by the Prophet Muhammad way back when. So these are things that we have heard in many, many of these protests in the streets of the UK, as well as Australia and even the United States, and nothing has has been done about it. Not to mention the fact we've seen explicit support for Hamas, a UK designated terror group, as well as Hezbollah, a designated terror group as well. Even the Houthis that were firing on British ships. We heard chants supporting the Houthis. I mean, this is insanity. It's, again, not pro-Palestinian, not pro-Muslim, not pro-Arab, none of these things. It is pro-terror. Terror, which, by the way, disproportionately impacts Muslims in the Middle East.
Of course. And Emily, why do you think liberal left-wing governments like we have in the UK and like they have in Australia seem to sit back and accept the fact that basically Jew hatred is on our streets, visible? Jews are attacked in their homes, in their synagogues, even in restaurants we've been talking about today. Why do governments sit back and let that happen?
Well, I think this is the byproduct, at least in part, of a very coordinated effort by more extreme movements like, for example, the Muslim Brotherhood, to convolute the reality and to make it seem like some of these organizations that are in fact giving cover to terrorism are actually advocating for the Muslim community. And that is not the case. And you don't need to look any further than the fact that many Arab Muslim nations have banned the Muslim Brotherhood explicitly. So why hasn't the United Kingdom? These are organizations that also oppress Muslims. So they have this false sense of defending the Muslim community by allowing these types of protests, when in fact, they're not doing that at all. It's the endorsement of extremism that harms both Jews and Muslims. And of course, as we've seen in recent weeks alone across Europe, threats against Christmas markets, against Christian communities as well. And we see it every year. And it's just devastating that they misunderstand what's actually happening here, and that these groups are not in fact pro-Muslim or pro-Islam. They are something that's very damaging to the Muslim community who wants to live in peace.
Emily, where does this end? What do we do to stop this?
I think there needs to be a change in the attitude of many, not all, but many Western governments, the UK included, and of course Australia, when it comes to cracking down on some of these pro-terror protests and movements, some organizations as well who have, again, as I mentioned, given cover to these more radical groups and radical speakers. It isn't something that should be tolerated in a Western society, and it has nothing to do with freedom of speech. If you're advocating for violence against minority groups, against, in this case, what happened, Australian Jews, that isn't something that should be tolerated under the guise of free speech. It's incitement to violence with a high likelihood of something actually happening, exactly as we saw today. Too many people have already paid the ultimate price for this. It shouldn't happen ever again. We need to see a crackdown on radicalism.
And Emily, obviously, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I mean, there was a child killed in this attack today. But what would you say to people who are protesting, the pro-Palestine, the genuine sort of like worried about, the murder of children in Gaza? What would you say to them saying, well, hold on a minute, children are dying in Gaza, or were dying in Gaza every day before the peace process kicked in, which will hopefully move forward in January. What would you say to them today?
Well, I think that there's a profound difference, even legally speaking, in terms of a legally executed war, which is what we saw after October 7th, and terrorism that invades people's homes or community events and shoots up innocent people on the streets. No civilians have been targeted by the IDF. Tragically, and it is a tragedy, there are civilian casualties. There always have been in war, and there will be in war until we find better methods of combating extremism the way that Israel has been forced to when it comes to dealing with Hamas. Every single Palestinian civilian casualty is a tragedy, particularly children. But again, we're talking about an environment in which the ruling power, a terrorist organization, Hamas, is actively trying to maximize civilian casualties in Gaza in order to fight a PR war. They care more about a PR war against the Jews, not just Israel, but the Jews, than they do about their own youth. And that is a tragedy in and of itself.
Just going to bring you a bit of breaking news, Emily. It has been confirmed that an Israeli citizen is amongst the dead, according to the Foreign Ministry. We don't have a name yet, but this is according to Israel's Foreign Ministry. And your Israeli Foreign Minister has urged Canberra to act against the surge in anti-Semitism during a phone call with his Australian counterpart, Penny Wong. He said since October 7, there's been a surge in anti-Semitism in Australia, including including particularly violent incitement against Israel and Jews. What is it about Australia in particular? We have seen the sharpest rise in anti-Semitism in Australia more than any other country. Emily, why is it Australia?
Well, I don't know that Australia is so unique in this regard. We've also seen a lot of extremism, like I said, Canada, United States, and UK as well. But Australia does also struggle with immigration issues. And we've also seen since October 7th that the Islamic Republic of Iran has used Australia almost as a playground to advocate their very radical pro-terror ideology. They have targeted the Jewish community already more than once. That's what ended up getting the Australian government to finally designate the IRGC as a terrorist organization. And indeed, they are. So we're dealing with a lot of extremism on many different fronts, some of it as a result of migration trends, some of it not. But regardless, the government hasn't cracked down on it, even the same way that we've seen in the UK, that ultimately police did crack down on flying flags of Hamas or Hezbollah. These are things that are not allowed. They're also not allowed in Australia. The difference is that nobody's doing anything about it. No one has been enforcing the law when we've seen these protest after protest after protest targeting the Jewish community. Of course, we've also seen synagogues being attacked, Jewish communities being attacked over the past 2 years in Australia. So again, it's not a surprise, but it is indeed a tragedy.
Yeah, Emily, thank you very much. That's Israeli-American journalist Emily Schrader there joining us. And if you are just joining us, we are talking about the absolute horror of 12 dead in a shooting at Bondi Beach, a Hanukkah party. I have the little leaflet here advertising Chanukah by the sea. It's in beautiful seaside colours, and it was our Bondi Beach Park near the children's playground. That's where this happened. A child, as we know, has tragically lost their life. Live entertainment, interactive fun and games, music for all ages, lighting of the Hanukkah candles, dinner, hot chips, ice cream and more. Come and celebrate the light of Chanukah together with the community. Bring your friends, bring the family. Let's fill Bondi with joy and light. And for something as joyous as that to end in this is just beyond horrific. As if you are just joining us, that's 12 dead, 29 injured, including a child and a police officer have lost their life. We have also the breaking news now of King Charles's reaction. He says, "My wife and I are appalled and saddened by the most dreadful anti-Semitic terrorist attack on Jewish people attending the Chanukah celebration at Bondi Beach. Our hearts go out to everyone who has been affected so dreadfully, including the police officers who were injured while protecting members of their community. We commend the police, emergency services and members of the public whose heroic actions no doubt prevented even greater horror and tragedy. In times of hurt, Australians always rally together in unity and resolve. I know that the spirit of community and love that shines so brightly in Australia and the light at the heart of the Chanukah Festival will always triumph over the darkness of evil." Okay, we are, well, as I say, if you are just joining me, we are talking about this horrific attack on what should have been a very joyous start to Hanukkah. And if you are a bit unsure what Hanukkah is, by the way, and many of you are messaging, it's the Jewish Festival of Lights, and it's a simple 8-day celebration, and it starts on Sunday the 14th of December and goes through to Monday the 22nd of December this year. And it commemorates the rededication of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, marking the miracle of a single day's oil lasting 8 days. And that's why you will see many candles, you know, the candles being lit. There's a large celebration in Trafalgar Square to signify the lighting of the first candle, which Mayor Sadiq Khan has reassured he will have extra Metropolitan Police officers on the scene. How reassuring that is. I'll let you fill the blanks in. In any case, the Prince and Princess of Wales have also issued a statement saying our thoughts are with every Australian today following the terrible attack at Bondi Beach. We extend our deepest condolences to the families and friends of those who have lost their lives and stand with the Jewish community in grief. We are also thinking about the bravery of the emergency responders, particularly the 2 injured officers. Okay. Right, okay. Well, I mean, obviously the stalwart that gets through all these stories for us is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, a horrific day, absolutely horrific day. Is there any news more coming in about who did this, why, and what happens next?
Well, certainly some news on one of the suspects that we've been bringing you for an hour or so now, but no news on that second suspect. You're looking at aerial images there, looking down at the massive emergency service response to this unfolding terrorist attack on Bondi Beach. It's now just coming up to 2 a.m. in the morning in Sydney, Australia. Many people, of course, now have gone to bed to begin the working week again. But here in Western nations, people absorbing the news of the horrific terrorist attack, and that's what it is now that has confirmed to have taken place on Bondi Beach in Sydney, because according to the police commissioner for New South Wales Police, it was the intelligence on one of the suspects, and indeed also it was the fact that they are now certain that this Hanukkah event, and you heard Dawn there describe exactly what that is, the Festival of Light, that is that 8-day festival that began, of course, earlier in the day our time, but in the evening Australian time, and the exact same thing is about to happen here in the UK as we get in to the late afternoon and the evening, as Hanukkah will be officially marked by the lighting of candles at various events in population centres and in homes right across the UK where there are Jewish communities, Jewish people in neighbourhoods. What we can tell you with regard to one of the suspects is that we can name him as 24-year-old Naveed Akram, an Australian of Pakistani origin. He is from Lahore in Pakistan. His driver's license was found at the location where he was shot by police officers responding to this incident on the bridge. You're looking at that little bridge there, the vantage point that they used to open fire on people at that Hanukkah celebration. Now, we don't know at this stage whether he is the gunman that was actually killed or the gunman that was critically